Palouse Pathway started in about 2012, which was the year my son graduated from Moscow High School. I got very involved in helping him with college. But the other thing is I was the head of the parent group at Moscow High then, and I became really aware that there were some information gaps out there in terms of what I was learning about what you needed to know to really sort of master the college thing, and then what parents in general knew. We just tended not to know a lot of the stuff that would have helped to know. So when I was the head of the parent group, I put a lot of information out there. And then after I left Moscow High, I decided there was still a need for a lot of information, and so I founded Palouse Pathways. I ended up getting a certificate in college admissions counselors, so now I'm part of a national network of people with that training, which is actually very, very cool. Anybody with an interest in doing that. I actually went back to UCLA Extension and got a certificate in college admissions counseling. So, and it's a really interesting field to be in. And when I started doing that, I realized how little I knew when I went through this with my son. So I just want to pass on a little more of the information that I wish I had known. So when it comes to paying for college, it's important to realize it's not just how much the school costs. It's really a function of all of these things in terms of what your experience is going to be like at the end of the line, and if you find yourself in debt or feeling awful about how much you spent, all of these things are going to play a role. So, and for different families, they will play different roles, but I think it's important to have each of these puzzle pieces in mind as you assess what a good value is for you, and then also as you figure out the strategy of schools that your students should apply to, because that really can make a difference. There's a lot of different possibilities. So we're going to start with price, okay? The thing you should know about price is that there's a term of art that's used which is called cost of attendance. And that is a federally mandated, that's a federally mandated term, and it doesn't just mean the fixed cost from the university. So cost of attendance is not simply what the school charges you. It includes other things as well. And I'm going to show you how you can see that. I'm looking at this website that I really like, which is called Big Future. You can look at any school on Big Future. It's run by the College Board. It has some great information, and it has for every school, I mean really, this one has pretty much any school, any community college you could want to look at. And it has a tab there that says paying. And you can go to paying, and it will break down all the costs. And so this is what I wanted to show you. Cost of attendance ends up being tuition and fees, room and board, books and supplies, an estimate for personal expenses, and an estimate for transportation expenses. So when you hear the term cost of attendance, you can kind of subtract, rule of thumb about $5,000 from that to get the annual tuition for the school, because it's also going to include some travel, some personal. Okay, so when you hear the term cost of attendance, that's what it's referring to. Okay, so and as we're going along, you can just shout out your questions. It'll make things more interesting than listening to me, I think. So hello there. So let me show you this. We'll just get to the difficult stuff early on. These are some of the bad numbers. These are cost of attendance at some different schools around the country. This is 1 year of tuition. Well, no, it's 1 year cost of attendance. And so you've got NYU is probably the most expensive school out there. And Their cost of attendance is almost $73,000 a year. UCLA is almost $60,000 for out of state. And that's an important thing to know, is that state colleges and universities tend to charge non-residents a ton of money. Not all of them, but some of the real prestigious ones, because they know people will pay it, and that way they subsidize the education for their in-state people. So the UC schools, with one exception, are going to have a sticker price like that. Okay, Beloit College is a small liberal arts school in Wisconsin. Its cost of attendance is almost $60,000. College of Idaho is the most expensive school in Idaho. It's a private school, and it's $41,500. And then you'd see WSU, University of Idaho, in-state and out-of-state. Not too different. North Idaho College is $15,600 in-state, $21,800 out-of-state. Spokane Falls Community College doesn't have any room and board, but they estimate with where you'd have to live. It's comparable to North Idaho. I think it's $16,000 a year in-state. I didn't look at out-of-state for that one, but anyway. So that's the really bad news for me to get out there. But fear not, it gets better. So yes.
So when you were looking at the Big Future website,
Yes.
when it said at home, living at home, it included room and board. Is that just figuring in the value?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not actual cost. It's just.
Yeah, no, it's figuring out the value. The one thing you're going to find is that a lot of those schools make it kind of difficult to live at home. It's an uphill battle to live at home even if you're local. I mean, I know students do, but I think you have to like plead hardship or something if you want to, do that. Could you go ahead and I wanted to get people's emails so I can send you all these links to this stuff, so you will have them, like Big Future. So let's look at that site again, just so you can see it. It's got great information, and we can look, any school you want to look at. It'll also have how to apply for financial aid. It has financial aid by the numbers, and we'll talk about that. That's some important information. But so that's Big Future, and it's just a great clearinghouse of information about costs of attendance and financial aid. Okay, so cost of attendance includes those elements. So what can you do to keep the price? What can you do to save money on the price piece? Well, you can find schools that cost less, which is mostly your least expensive schools are going to be in-state public schools in terms of the price. There are free schools in the US. There aren't too many, but there's a handful of free schools. Like all of the military academies are free. And there's a couple kind of quirky schools. Like there's a school called Deep Springs College, which is in California, which is free. It's a great school. It's very hard to get into. And they're accepting women this year for the first time. Yes, they are. It's a little tiny school that was endowed, and you work like on a farm.
You actually do pay for it 20 years after you go there.
Oh, you do? You have to?
You have to pay for a student
Oh.
to attend.
Oh, that's very cool. If anybody's interested in that school, that is a great school. It's a very, very unique place. It's very hard to get into, but it's a very cool school. There's also a school called Webb Institute on Long Island, New York, that gives an engineering degree in shipbuilding, ship engineering. But you can use that degree and do anything with it because you've learned engineering. So there are some schools that you cannot pay for. Another one is Berea College in Kentucky is a work college. Work colleges were founded in the mid-1800s, and they were supposed to be college for the rest of us, who weren't rich Harvard people. And the movement, I don't know if there were ever a lot of them. At this point, I think there's 7 or 8. And the main one is this one called Berea in Kentucky, and you work. And if you will not have to pay tuition if you attend that school because everyone works. So that's a neat school. I really would love for somebody to go there. I like the idea of Berea. But okay, so the other thing that's important to know for saving money on the cost of college is the WUI program, the Western Undergraduate Exchange. Do you know about that? So the WUI is, let's see, I guess the real thing is the WISH, is the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, is basically every school from the Dakotas West are part of a consortium that agree to charge students from the other states in the consortium 1.5 times in-state tuition to attend their colleges. Now, there are a number of caveats, but you can attend schools in any of those other states for 1.5 times in-state tuition. Room and board is the same, I think, whether you're in-state or out-of-state. So this is a good website, and I'll send it to you. It has a list of all the schools that participate in the WUI program, and it's got it divided by state, and it's a good long list. I'll tell you a few things about it. A lot of schools don't put their most selective, highest demand schools in the WUI program. That's why the University of California schools are not WUI. That's why they charge $59,000 tuition. There's one UC school that is in the WUI program. It's a new one, or a newer one, and it's called UC Merced. And I think because they want to fill up that school, that is a WUI school. So you won't find University of Oregon in there. You won't find University of Washington in there. I don't think you find University of Arizona in there. So some of the flagships for certain states are not in there. On the other hand, University of Alaska's in there, University of Idaho's in there, the Dakotas are in there. I think Montana, University of, and Montana State are in there. So there are a lot of great schools in there. Like CU Boulder, the main campus isn't in there, but Colorado State is. So anyway, it's a big long list. You can look. Another thing you should know about it, though, is that some schools have requirements. They don't extend it to everybody who gets in. They only give it to people who meet certain criteria. And you can find that by just going to the website. So this is a super popular WUI school. I think the two most popular that I know about among kids here are in Idaho are Montana State and Western Washington. I think Montana State's popular for Washington kids as well, but Western isn't a WUI school for them. So, but those are the two that seem to get the most kids from here. So here's what you find for any school when you click on the link. It'll tell you whether it applies to transfer students, and it'll tell you the majors that are covered. Some schools only extended to limit kind of unpopular majors, like they're trying to fill their schools, so they will have just a few. This one, Montana State, has a bunch of them, and then at the bottom it'll tell you whether there's a special requirement, and it says to be considered for WUI, freshmen must apply, have ACT or SAT scores. Let's see. Yeah, see, it says they have to have, where's the thing? This is a hard one, actually. Usually this one's pretty hard to get into, but I don't know if it actually says it there anymore. It says it's competitive. Okay, new freshmen. As long as they maintain a grade point average, continues to be considered. And it's interesting. They don't have as much information as they used to. Some schools will actually have a set score and tell you you have to have this score. A few years ago, Montana State required, back when the SAT had 3 pieces, now it's only got 2, but when it had 3, I remember they actually had listed you have to have a 1930 to be considered for the WUI program at Montana State, which is like pretty high, right? That's a good SAT score. So some schools make getting into WUI a little difficult, other schools not so much. But anyway, this is a list that a lot of families here really use and pursue schools. Like I say, Montana State's real popular, Colorado State, Western Washington, Northern Arizona University is a WUI school. You know, there's a lot of schools, and that is a good option for students who want to go out of state but don't want to have to pay huge tuition. And I want to say that tuition at Montana State ends up being about $13,000 or so, because something around there. But you can see all the numbers when you look. I feel like it's gone up, so I don't really have the set number, but it would be 1.5 times what they charge their own students. Okay. The other thing when you think about the price is you have to consider how much. It's 4 years, right? Or 3. We'll talk about the numbers, but you know, or 6. It's not. Don't just look at 1 year. Sometimes when you get into a school, you can see if they'll lock in tuition. But remember, you're looking at a few years there, and it can change. One good way it changes is if your student moves off campus and lives in a place that housing is inexpensive. And like Montana, Bozeman traditionally was pretty low-cost housing. My friend and fellow Palouse Pathways person, when her son went to Montana State, in his second year he moved off campus and paid like nothing. And you know, boys, they don't buy food that much, right? So I mean, the room and board went from like $13,000 to, you know, like $3,000 or $4,000. It just really shrunk. Conversely, if you're in a city and you move off campus, you're likely to pay a lot more living off campus in some place like Boston or, you know, Seattle. I mean, I guess it depends. But if you're in a place where a student's going to move off campus, that can really impact the year-to-year cost. Okay, so that's something to think about. Another thing to think about is residency. It's very hard to establish residency when you are in school. Most states won't allow the time you spend there as a student to apply to establishing residency. Like in Washington State, you can't be earning more than 6 credits in a year to be considered for residency. Okay, so most states don't want to give residency to students. Some states, notably Utah, I guess that's the only one I know, maybe there are others, but Utah, you can establish residency when you're in school. And they're very upfront about it at University of Utah, Utah State. They'll tell you what you have to do. You can do it after the first year, so, and save a ton of money. So there's a student from Moscow, gosh, he must be getting to be almost a senior, who after his first year, they filled out the paperwork and he became a Utah resident and, you know, ended up saving a lot of money on college. I think he had to not do WUI in order to do that, something like that. But anyway, they're very explicit about the requirements. You're not putting one over on anybody or anything like that to do it. It's a perk that they offer, I think, to get people to go there. So that's one thing. Another thing to think about, if you have this feeling that, well, maybe my kid will move to Washington for a year and get in-state tuition in Washington and not go to school. So a classmate of my son's had that idea and decided she'd take a gap year and move to Pullman and work, and then she would be a Washington resident, and she would go to Western Washington on Washington rates. Well, maybe you can do that, but you got to be really careful because you can't have any kind of dependence on your parent and do that. So what she had is she was working, she was supporting herself, but she was still on her parents' health insurance. And so that she could not establish residency because of that. So it's, I'm not saying it can't be done, but it can't be done easily. So you got to really, really, be very careful if you're going to try something like that. Okay, so any questions about that stuff? I know it's a lot of stuff. Okay, so then I want to talk about the years to graduate, because that's the other variable, right? If you're in for 3 years, it makes a big difference. If you're in for 6 years, things cost a lot more. And so the time you spend in school is a really important consideration in the cost of college. So if you're planning to do one of the things like Running Start or dual enrollment, that can really help you pay for college, because you could maybe even do it in 3 years instead of 4, which is a huge savings, right? Another one is CLEP. Do you know about the CLEP program? CLEP is another program that's run through the College Board, which is the same one that does SAT and ACTs. So it's CLEP, and it's a series of tests you can take. Yeah, you can and they cost $200, and you can pay $200 and take a test, and if it's sort of based on life experience, they say, but you can also study for it, and you will get college credit for it. So a classmate of Daniel's actually came and spoke to the first one of our sessions, and so he skipped a whole year of school, and he did it with dual enrollment, but mostly he did it with CLEP. He took 3 or 4 of these classes. So if you go to College Board and you go to CLEP, you can see what the exams are. They have history, they have language, literature, business, science and mathematics, all different kinds of things. They have some study guides here too, so you can sign up for it and study here. You do it in high school, you do it over the summer. So that is a way to reduce your time in school, okay? Now, caveat, not every school is going to accept dual enrollment, Running Start, or CLEP. I would say, as a continuum, probably the CLEP maybe is going to be the least accepted. Dual enrollment is kind of in the middle. The thing about dual enrollment now, since it's all off campus, some schools are thinking about it a little differently than they would Running Start, where you're actually in a college class. Running Start, and when you do dual enrollment and you're on campus in a college class, that's a college class, right? But schools, especially private schools, don't have to think about it the same way if it's in the high school and it's not exactly a college class. So there are many private schools that don't give credit for these kind of things, and you will not save the time on CLEP, dual enrollment, Running Start, or AP, a lot of them. They just don't. So just understand that that's something that a lot of private schools don't. Not all private schools. Like, I don't know about University of Portland. They may. I think, you have to find out, and you can actually check with their admissions office how they treat credits from things like that. Most of them want you to be in school for 4 years, so that's the problem. They're not going to give you time off. They might put you in a different level class, but a lot of them don't want to. They want you to be there for 4 years. So bear that in mind, depending on the schools you're looking at. Then there's also some schools now where you can get an accelerated program, like a 4-year MBA, bachelor's degree. There's different options. I want to say Purdue is offering a 3-year track. And I think that's going to grow more popular as options. So there are schools that are going to be offering a quicker time through. The other thing I want to tell you about is more than 4 years is a really big problem, because it's where, if you look at the college cost student loan crisis that exists right now, the biggest part of it is people who didn't finish school or spent a really long time in school. It's not a 4-year thing. And you know that. I mean, there's a lot of folks graduating or who've spent time in universities with like over $100,000 in loans for a bachelor's degree. And like at U of I, there are people with that. And that's kind of hard to do at U of I if you do the math. I mean, that's not 4 years of school. That's sort of a track that is not really a linear progression through college, 4 years and done. So what I want to just emphasize is how really important it is to get out in 4 years, you know, and finding the program that's going to get you out in 4 years. So there's a few things you think about, because if you're in for 5 years, you're paying 5 years of tuition or 6 years of tuition, so that's one thing. But also, you're not earning. So when you think about the cost of that, you're losing years of salary, and you're losing years of seniority. So it's a real, you know, it has a lot of sort of a cascading effect, and so it's really important to think about what is the school that's going to get you through in 4 years. And where I come out on this is a school that appears to cost more, that gets everyone through in 4 years, may be a better buy than a school that's less expensive, that has a very low 4-year graduation rate. So that, I just want to put that out there as something worth taking into account as you look at what the cost, the ultimate cost is going to be. If you look at, this is a great website, and when you sign that, put your email on the list, I'm going to send you these websites, and this one is awesome. This is the college completion chart from the Chronicle of Higher Ed. And it's really interesting. So the thing that they normally talk about is they talk about 6-year graduation rate, okay? And that's generally the reported number, okay? But you can also sort of see how many graduate in 4 versus 6. And to me, that's really important, because the 6-year graduation rate, that may tell you a bunch of people dropped out and aren't finishing at all. So a lot will finish in 6. But this one, you can tell how many finish in 4 versus 6, right? So you can see how many are still there after 4. And so this is Idaho public colleges. Public colleges are always less than private. You can't generalize too much about that. It's a very different population. You know, it's just different. So you can't say public colleges are bad because, you know, people take longer. But it's still some important information. So at Idaho public colleges, 15.7% graduate in 4 years, 41% graduate in 6 years. And so that's telling you there's a big chunk of people that are there between 4 and 6 years. So they are there for longer than 4. So, and then it's got it divided by, you can do it school by school as well. Really interesting data. I just think this is so cool. So then you can see the different schools. University of Idaho, and this is probably 2 or 3 years out of date, says University of Idaho 4-year graduation rate is 25, 6-year graduation rate is 54. So yeah, so anyway, this is really interesting data. I'm not going to editorialize it that much. I'm going to tell you, among private schools, there's quite a range of completion rates. but if you go to the, sort of the top tier schools, you're going to find graduation rates in the 90s. Now, that is a group of kids that has a lot of advantages to start with, which is why one reason their graduation rate is so high. That's why I don't want to generalize too much about this, but they may be kids from better off backgrounds, they may be kids who are better prepared, so yes, they're going to have an easier time going through this. However, all things being equal, it's better to be around kids like that. Your kid's going to have an easier time getting out in 4 if the other kids are getting out in 4, right? It's just people do what the people around them do. And so even though you can say that that may be, you can say, well, my kid will get out in 4. And certainly there's a lot of people who go through U of I in 4 or 3. It totally can be done. And if you know your kid and you know their, the way that they're viewing college and their initiative and their drive and their focus, and you say, my kid's getting through in 4 or 3, you could totally be correct. But really, the best predictor of how long a student will take to get through college is how long the other students in the college take to get through. So just bear that in mind. And then the other thing is sometimes there's reasons it takes more than 4, right? There may be reasons like you can't get classes. So if you can't get classes in a major that easily. So that might be one reason why it takes longer. But really another might just be a culture that says kids tend to take 12 classes, or when my husband was teaching, he would have kids that would take incompletes every year, like 4 or 5 of them, and then they would, come back and take the class again the next year, and they'd pay for it again, so it seemed like part of the culture was, you do that. And so that if from a cost perspective, that may be something, that may not be a culture you want to be all over. That's what I'm saying about that. Any questions about that? And I know I'm editorializing here. And like I say, I really don't want to, not take seriously the fact that people with advantages tend to do better. But on the other hand, if you can get your student in a place that they're more likely to finish in 4, that may be worth some money. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about is the earnings and experiences that college provides for your student. And you can think about intangible experiences, and not everybody's going to weigh them different ways. And how much is it worth to you to have your child in an environment that's really stimulating or really whatever. I actually think people tend to put too much stock in what their kids want. Because part of that is a function of exposing your kid to a lot of different things. You could get them to want something cheaper, you just got to expose it. There's so many kids that they say, oh, their heart's set on going to this school, and it's like, well, I'm from Hawaii originally, and I was there a few months ago, and my sister's friend's granddaughter wanted to go to Cooper Union in New York City, and they did not have a lot of money, and I don't know how she even found this school from Hawaii. And my sister says, well, she got a lot of aid, and after all the aid she got, they're going to have to come up with $30,000 a year, and they totally don't have it. They're talking about how they're going to have to borrow this. And my sister telling me, but her heart's set on it. And it's like, who cares? She doesn't know anything about this school. It's not an educated, so that's all I'm saying. Sorry kids, but I think that you fall in love with a cheaper school, It's just as easy to fall in love with a cheap school. But there are intangible experiences that are wonderful and worth it, right? I mean, there are some great experiences out there, and there are great experiences in all kinds of schools. So you can't really, it's hard. Anyway, it's hard to quantify, but you may have some of those on your plate. My son went to school in Boston, and there's a lot of kids who want to go to school in Boston. Boston is like college central. It just feels like college, you know, and everybody there is in college. And so you have that feeling, and that is an intangible that has some value for people, and they'll say, my kid wants to be in this or that environment. So some, if you can afford it, if it's a priority, you can do that. Another one that's more tangible is the sort of educational opportunities that you can get in different colleges. And granted, you can get good opportunities in many schools. But when you think about professional opportunities and things. So my niece went to University of Portland. She graduated a couple years ago. And she got to be a Fulbright. She was a Fulbright scholar. She's just finishing her year in Luxembourg this year. And she was not the best student in the world when she went in. I mean, this is not a kid that you would, so a Fulbright is a really pretty high accolade for people maybe who want to go to grad school or something. And it's a really nice feather in your cap. And she was not a stellar student going into school. She was fine, but I mean, I would never have thought that she would have gotten this. But what I found out about University of Portland is there is a person there who's in like the honors college who they have like 8 or 9 Fulbrights a year, which is amazing for a school that's not super selective and is not that big, right? So in other words, there are places where you can find really great opportunities that may be worth it, right? Or if you want to go to medical school, you know, you might want to find a place that has a lot of people who do really well on the MCATs, you know. That's one that sort of is going to require you to have a big picture of what's happening after college, but some of those opportunities may be worth paying for a little bit. So, but then the other ones are very tangible and concrete, and that's money and how much you get paid as a result of going to different schools. And again, this is sort of talking about most people, right? Because you can, you know, students at University of Idaho go to work at Microsoft, go to work at Google, a few. And then you can go to another school where 25 kids go there, or 35 kids. So there are salaries, salary rates that can vary between schools, and that may be something you want to pay attention to. This is another really good site. Oops. What happened? HDMI 1. Let me try that. Anyway, this site is called College Scorecard, and it's maintained by the federal government. And it is, it tells you salaries and things like that, so it's very cool. What just happened to this? Okay. Why that would have happened? Oh, there it is. Okay. So this, let's find a school. Okay. So the other thing you need to know, though, about a lot of times when you'll list, they'll show a list of the schools that are the, you know, where the graduates go on to make the most money. Have you ever seen those lists? Do you know what stands out about those lists? They're all engineering schools. So when you look at a list and they say this is where to go to school if you want to make the most money, it's Harvey Mudd and these little schools that only produce engineering graduates, because engineering graduates are the ones that make money after 4 years, right? Because they go right to work. And so you can't really compare that school to a liberal arts school where people are getting history degrees and other things. And so if you want to compare, this is a wonderful site because you can compare by degree. So what degree shall we look at? Any ideas?
Physical therapy.
Okay. Is that an undergrad? Can you get an undergrad in that? Let's see.
Kinesiology.
Okay. That's good. Okay, so we want a 4-year. Okay, and then we'll go to, if I could type it in, let's see. Oh, it doesn't have kinesiology. Should I do biology or, no, let's see. Health
Yeah.
professions? Okay,
There
okay, let's do that. Shall we do a region? Let's see, location. We'll do a region. We'll do the, you know, they never say Northwest. I don't know why not.
Far
Far
west.
West. I know, but that includes so much. Okay, so then this is really cool. So this lists the schools by the salary you make after attending, and it also shows, this one, some of these don't have a lot of data available. Here, we'll go down to some of these. So these are, oh, we're in Los Angeles. See, if we'd searched by state, we'd do better. So University of San Diego. You can see the median income for this major, and they're above it, right? Theirs is like 59,000. It looks like the median's like 40 or something. You can see their graduation rates. You can see the annual costs. And you can do this for any major. You can do this for, you know, so you can also, you're looking at graduation rate, you're looking at median. So this is a really, I love this site. So here's Linfield. Linfield's a good school. And you know, some of them you can't generalize too much from some of them. There may be a reason that the salaries are low. It may be that people go in the Peace Corps or something. You don't know why it's low, but as a ballpark measure, this is kind of a good way to do it. So this is college scorecard .ed.gov, and I'll send you the link for that. So, okay, so that's again just looking at earnings. And then I also found, so another thing even about earnings is it's not even after you get out. So my son was in engineering school, and if that's what you happen to be pursuing, you could go to a school that has incredible internship opportunities from year one, you know, because they will have recruiters come in and recruit kids from year one. So I think he made $5,000 after his first year of school. He made like $15,000 his second summer, and then his third summer he made like $25,000. You know, so there's real money to be had. I'm just, you know, and I hate putting that out. You know, I like to talk about money like that, but I want you to understand that it's not just after kids graduate. It's they can become marketable while they're in school if they're in places where they get exposed to recruiters and stuff. And like I say, I think that U of I has pretty good connections with some of these places. It's not just like you go to a private school and you do this. I think WSU does also. I think it's a question, though, of as you look at schools, think about ask them who recruits there. Ask them about summer experiences that their employees have or that their students have, because it can make a big difference. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about, but it's going to take a long time, so don't get too excited, is aid and scholarships. And if you notice, I made this piece a lot bigger, and the reason I did that is because that's what I really can offer you in terms of information you may not have, which is to tell you a little bit about how this piece works. And this is something that's probably changed a lot since we were in college. So here's what the deal is with this. A lot of people think they're going to find scholarships to pay for college, but if you look, scholarships are a really small part of the money that goes into paying for college. The biggest piece of paying for college is the money you get from colleges, okay? That is the biggest piece of money out there. bigger than Pell Grants. And so that's what we're going to talk about next. The other thing, I can't get this darn thing to go down here. Okay. This should say on the bottom, but you can't see it because I'm computer illiterate. It says colleges are like airplane tickets. You know, when you're in an airplane, the person sitting next to you probably didn't pay what you paid for the seat. Like they got it on a different day, or they're flying through a different airport or something like that. You can pretty much say the likelihood is they're paying some different amount of money. So that's the idea here, is that the person next to you in college is probably paying a different amount of money. Even though you saw those costs of attendance, everybody's getting some different package of aid, so that the amount of money you're paying is probably different from other people. Okay, and here's the other thing that's really important. Colleges are very different in terms of how they award aid, who they award it to, how much they give. And so that's why I like to spend some time on that. It's, you know, it's sort of a recipe for stress and frustration. However, the good news about it is they have really made some of this information a lot more transparent than it was. And again, it was the federal government set it up so that schools have to disclose to you way in advance how much money they'll give you. So families now really do have the opportunity to do that searching before you submit applications. And so that's why it's really worth talking about what the different aid formulas are. So that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so now we talk about how to get money from schools, okay? The first thing, and this is where this glossary comes in handy, this is where this alphabet soup of terms comes at you, okay? The first thing to understand is that there are two kinds of aid that colleges offer. There is need-based aid based on your ability to pay, and then there is merit aid, which is based on them wanting you to come to their school, okay? And that merit aid is given regardless of your family's financial status. Need-based aid generally is given because you got into the school. You don't have to, you know, you got into the school and you have financial needs, so they give it to you. It's not like you have to do something else to qualify for it. So those are the two types of aid. Generally, the term financial aid refers to need-based aid, especially if you look at like the federal government. So this is this federal student aid, and a lot of the information you see that's about this type of information is talking about financial need-based aid, okay? So those are the two types of aid that are available, more to a greater or lesser degree from all kinds of different schools, okay? So here's some more terms. These are terms that have to do with financial or need-based aid. The FAFSA is the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Free, emphasize free, because there's some websites that you can go to and you type in FAFSA and it'll charge you some amount of money to file the document for you. That's not legit. You don't have to pay to file that. There's no money associated with starting that federal process, okay? So that's FAFSA. There's something like the FAFSA, which is used by a bunch of private schools, actually, and even a couple of public schools, who basically decided they wanted more information than the FAFSA requires. And so they have another thing that is another way to figure out your financial situation. And it's called the CSS profile. And I'll send you the links to that. A lot of people say, well, why in the world would I want to fill out another financial aid thing after I've already filled out the FAFSA? Well, it's because, as you'll see, a lot of the schools that require that are more generous with aid. So, you know, they ask you for more, but they give you more. So that would be why you would fill that out. Okay, so those are two devices which kind of do the same thing. And what they're doing is they're taking your financial picture and they are figuring, based on the information you give them, your EFC. Your EFC is your expected family contribution. And it's funny because people are like, well, I don't expect to pay that. You know, it's not expected by whom. It's not clear. But that's a pretty important number in this process. They say that's the amount of money we expect your family to come up with for college based on your financial data.
And what do they consider there?
I'll share. It's very heavily income based. Okay. And depending on whether it's the FAFSA, like the FAFSA doesn't ask you about the value of your home even. It takes into account some savings. It doesn't take into account any of your retirement savings. Okay, so retirement savings are not taken into account. Your other savings are taken into account. But it's not a lot. Like, and the older you are, the less of your savings they try to tap. So just I guess with this idea that you need it for retirement. So so they'll ask how old you are. And I think, I want to say it's like, maybe they expect you to spend 5% of your savings, non-retirement savings. So it's, the income plays a much bigger role than savings. And like when people say, oh, I shouldn't save in a 529 plan or a college savings plan because they'll just take my savings, they don't actually. They take a piece of it, but it's actually worth saving because they don't take it all. It's in your interest to save. Okay, so then the other thing is, need is the cost of attendance minus your EFC, the amount they expect your family to pay, is need, okay? So let's say you're applying to NYU and it's so $70,000 and they say your family, your EFC is $10,000 a year, your need is $60,000, okay? So need-based aid looks at that number, okay? So let's talk a little bit more about the EFC. There's a website, another College Board just has a lock on all of this stuff. They have a place where you can figure out your EFC, and it's not that complicated. Actually, it's not complicated. It's called the EFC calculator. So you go to Big Future and you go to EFC calculator, and you will be able to get an estimate of what your EFC is likely to be. And if you go, it gives you a choice of whether you want to, it says pick a formula, and it says you can pick the federal, which is FAFSA, or you can pick institutional, which is that profile. So you can pick both. So you can say, tell me my numbers under either, tell me my EFC under either of those scenarios, okay? So that's something you can do now to get an idea of what your EFC is likely to be. And then you go through. The first questions are all going to be about, I guess they're actually back there a little bit. First questions are all about status, and they'll say, are you under 25? Are you married? Are you in the military? And basically all those questions are getting at, do we take your parents' income into account? Because they do, and they do until 25 or otherwise emancipated by being married or by being in the military. But otherwise, there is an expectation that parents pay for college until 25. And that's, you know, that can create hardship for people. If it's a really extreme situation of being sort of disowned by family, then you can get around it, but it's not that. It's really an expectation your parents have to pay. So that's how that works. But anyway, so you can do the EFC calculator and you will get a number. It's worth giving that a try. So here's a few pieces of information about this. this just drives people crazy. But it has a good, it's really has a reasonable basis, okay? The amount of, the year of income that they look at for freshman year is called prior year, okay? And that started, I think, 2 years ago. So here's what that means. It used to be that, say you were going to graduate from high school in 2017, they would use 2016's data to figure out how much aid you got. But that's the prior year. But the problem with that is they couldn't do that until after 2016 was done, so you couldn't apply for aid until spring of your senior year, okay? So that put it pretty late in the game. So what they decided to do to allow people to get these aid packages earlier is they used the prior year. So though it sounds silly, there's a good reason for it. What that means is the time period for figuring out how much aid you're going to get, or figuring out what your EFC is the period of time from January of sophomore year to December of junior year. That is the window of time that they're going to look at for your first year of college. Now, they'll re-look every year, but that tends to be the year that really sets the standard. So what that means is if you're graduating in 2020, right? You graduating in 2020? No, 2020. So that means this is the year, okay? If you're graduating in 2019, sorry, it was last year. If you're graduating in 2021, then 2019 is the year that's relevant for that. It doesn't, for most people who just have pretty regular earnings, it's not going to make a big difference, right? You just, you know, it's going to be what it is. But you know, if you've got the ability to take gains and things like that, you can, you know, you'll be able to try to, I guess probably what you would want to do if you had any sort of discretionary ability to take things, you probably want to take them the year before, you know, but otherwise, you know, this is the year that this information is going to be relevant, okay? So this is, and I can send you this. I really don't want to, you know, put too much time in it, but this gives you also an idea of what's taken into account. Oh, divorced families, this is pretty interesting, are treated differently. But so for the FAFSA, which is the main one, it excludes small business income and home equity. It doesn't take into account things like medical expenses. And then the bottom thing there under my thing is you get one FAFSA number. The profile can be used differently by different schools. They just gather the data. So let me tell you about divorce, because that is a kind of counterintuitive thing about this. The FAFSA looks only at the income of the household where the student spends more than 50% of their time. And it is the year before college. This isn't prior. This means, you know, from junior to senior year, where did the student spend 51% of their time? It doesn't matter who has physical custody. It doesn't matter whether child support is paid. It's just physically, where do you spend more than 50% of your time? And then they look at the income of everybody in that household, even people who don't have support obligations. So they're looking at that household's income. That's how FAFSA elected to treat divorce. CSS generally treats it the same way, although it might take some information about the non-custodial parent into account. So, and this is one that students can really use to their advantage if they know this and they have divorced parents and one makes substantially more than another. To live with the parent who earns a lot less money can make a big difference in terms of what aid you qualify for. So, and that's fair, that's legitimate. It's not a, you know, that's not doing anything improper. it's 51% of the time. So that's how that works. Okay.
What are treat gifts, Peggy?
Tw-
I don't know what that term means.
Okay. Treat gifts from family members as assets.
Oh,
Treats.
it's
Treats.
Okay.
Treats gifts.
Not a treat gift.
Treat gift. It's like
Okay.
Halloween.
Okay, so gifts from family members
Are treated as
assets.
right.
Okay.
And that's better, right? Because assets are better than income. But if you have a family situation, like grandma has a 529 plan or a savings thing, it is really worth talking to an accountant or someone about how all that works. Because the one thing is, kids' income is taken into account a lot more than adults' income. So your kids' income is going to be and savings are going to be totally hit for college. Yours not so much. Well, that seems fair. But if the parent puts the money in the kid's name, it's going to have a lot more of an impact on financial aid. So if there's any way you can talk that parent into putting it into your name and into your 529 plan that you do for the benefit of the kids, that's going to be way more favorable treatment. I am not a financial professional. There used to be a woman in the Tri-Cities who used to come give presentations for us, but she retired. I don't know anybody really expert in financial planning for college stuff. I wish I did. If you have an accountant, you should tell them they should develop expertise in that area, because it would be great to have somebody who really knew how to advise people. Okay, so I wanted to just give you a picture of what your estimated family contribution is likely to be. If you have very limited income, family income of $25,000 or less, and you're eligible to file the 1040 EZ, your EFC is 0, okay? If your income is under 50,000 and you qualify for free or reduced lunch or some government benefit, your assets will be disregarded. They'll only look at your income, and so your EFC will be quite small too, probably under 5. Okay? So then let's look at some middle class examples. And these are ballpark, let's say, because I crunched in the numbers, and I'm not sure I got them exactly right, but I think they're fairly accurate. So if you have adjusted gross income of $55,000, cash and taxable investments of $15,000, one kid in school, one kid not in school, that's what your EFC would be. It's not too much money, right? They would expect your family to come up with that amount of money for college for a year. So, and if you see the institutional numbers there, that number is because they expect every student to contribute. And so that's like work study right there. They say, we expect this much from the parent, and we expect work study in that amount for the student, okay? So that's why you're looking at, that's why the numbers look differently there, okay? So another middle class, a little different middle class, 80,000 adjusted gross income, 25,000 investments, 50,000 home equity, 2 kids, 1 in college, 1 not, and that's what the numbers would look like generally. They'd expect you to come up with that amount each year for college. Yes.
What if the family members are more than that? Like, there's some families that have more than 2 kids. Is that not put into consideration? Number of households?
I think that it is. I think it is. And I think it also it also affects your adjusted gross income. So it's going to come in a couple of places. So yes. Yeah. Okay. So then we'll go. So then now we go to here. Okay. And a more affluent family. This isn't good. So you see what you have here. You have a curve that goes like this. You know, pretty good, goes up a little and then goes, really spikes probably at 100,000 or 110 or so thousand. So, and you know, I think these numbers are high, but it's at least 35,000 that they expect incomes or families to pay, which is crazy, right? I mean, who could pay that much money? But here's one more thing about this. If you have 2 kids in college, okay, this is one I'm more familiar with. If that same family had 2 students in college, or any family has 2 students in college, what they do is they take your EFC and they divide it in 2. So they expect you to spend then half of it on each kid. So your EFC per kid is half as much, okay? So that's how that works. That's how the EFC works. Any questions about that? I mean, that's just ballpark. What that probably is telling you as you sit here is either, oh, I can live with some number like that, or it's telling you, oh, we are screwed. So I understand right now there's a divergence here, okay? So let me stay with the people who are like, that's not a terrible amount of money. Bad news for you is that a lot of schools don't meet all your need. So you might look at that EFC and you might say, I can do that. Oh, I could come up with 12,000. Well, not easily, but that doesn't kill me to think of. Well, the thing is, though, a lot of schools aren't going to charge you just that. So think again about what we were talking about. Cost of attendance minus your EFC equals need, okay? When a school tells you all you have to pay is your EFC, they're telling you we are meeting 100% of your need. That's how that works, okay? Because they're going to pay everything that's not your EFC, 100% of your need. Many schools don't pay 100% of your need. And some of the ones that do pay, or some of them meet your need with loans, okay? So they'll say, yeah, we'll give you all this money. You go ahead, you borrow this. And we're giving you the ability to borrow all this money. So that is something that if you have a moderate income and a fairly low EFC, you have got to be on the lookout for those schools that aren't going to really meet your need, okay? Because you do not want to apply to them. Okay, so how do you figure out whether a school is going to meet your need? Again, if you look at the College Board, they have great information about that, and I'll show you where it is. It's on the paying for, okay? So if we go here, okay, College Board. So what's a school? What school shall we look at?
University of Southern California.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. We can do that. We go to, okay, big future, USC. Oh shoot, that's Georgia. Oh, that's a Coast Guard Academy. That's not going to be good. USC. Okay, so here's where you can find this information for any school. You go to this University of Southern California, you go to that paying tab again, okay? And you see there's cost of admission, how to apply, and then there's this one, financial aid by the numbers, okay? So what you see is you see a pie chart, and the pie chart tells you how much of the money they're giving you is scholarships and grants, and how much is loans and jobs. So the blue is loans and jobs. So the green that's money that's free money. That's not money you have to pay back, okay? They meet 100% of need, okay? So this is a 100% need school, okay? They meet it mostly with scholarships and grants. A lot of times that loans and jobs is just going to be the work study. So they include that within there. That's a little bigger than just work study. That means they're probably expecting you to borrow a little money as part of the thing. But at least they're getting you to 100%. A lot of places are not. But let me tell you first off, and this is something that is really important to know. So this was NYU. So NYU does not meet that much need. They only meet 72% of need, and then they meet it with a lot of loans and jobs. And this is kind of gobbledygook, but just to give you an idea of what that means in terms of what you got to pay. So say the cost of attendance was $70,000. I did this a couple years ago. And your EFC is $10,000. Okay, so you're going to pay the $10,000, right? So your need is $60,000. But if, you know, based on what they say here, which is they do 72%, they only meet 72% of your need. I just did 60,000 times 72%. That means you're likely to get an award of like 43,000. And then of that award, about 30,000 is going to be a scholarship, and 13,000 is going to be loans and jobs. So that means you got to pay 13 more thousand. And then this is the need they're not even going to meet. They're just going to say, well, whatever, you do what you want to do. We're not going to do that for you. So that's another 16,000. So anyway, even though you're somebody with very limited income, they would expect you to spend that kind of money. Not a generous school, okay? There are some schools that are not generous. A problem, though, also is that a lot of state schools do not meet 100% of need, okay? And if you look at U of I, they do not meet 100% of need. They meet, let's see, where did I had U of I here? U of I meets less than 100% of need. WSU meets less than 100% need. It's a lot of state schools don't even try. They don't have the money to do it, so they don't do it. And you get the aid that you get. And this, remember, the school, if it's your in-state school, it's probably going to be the fairly affordable, but understand that you will have, they're not going to bring you down to your EFC, okay? So here's University of Idaho paying financial aid by the numbers. Ugh. See, they meet 80% of need, but they meet it with loans, okay? So because they don't have that, you know, Idaho does not overly spend on education, and they're not, you know. So this was how I estimated U of I. You spend 10,000, you got your EFC's 10. They're going to meet this much need, which is 80%, which is not bad. But of it, most of it's going to be a loan, so they're going to let you take out a loan. So you're going to pay around, you know, 16.8 at U of I. Not terrible, but you know, if you have no money, it's not too good. And if you have no money, there are very wonderful private schools that will be cheaper for you than U of I will be, because they meet 100% of need, okay? So anyway, that's what you're going to find at state schools. That's a problem with WUI too. WUI brings down the numbers, but they don't meet much need. So I don't know, you know, you'll find Cal Poly is not going to be a huge amount of money, but they're not going to give you much money, okay? So that's sort of the problem with that. WSU worked out to be about that. And you know, a lot of people who attend WSU from Pullman borrow money. I mean, almost everybody I know, they're all taking out loans to do it. Maybe not huge loans, but okay. So understand that about state schools. And you know, there's a really nice kid in Moscow that I've been working with for years, and he's going to college next year. And I asked him, you know, about his experience, and he ended up thinking, oh, I want to do this, you know, specialized biology research. You know, he's 18. Who's, you know, the odds of him doing that? Whatever, he wants to do this real specialized biology research. So he had to apply to these really big state schools and got no money, you know, got in, but got no money. So he can't go to UW, can't go to University of Michigan because he can't afford it. So, you know, that is a trap with big state schools, is they're not going to give you aid. Okay, but let's talk about the schools that will meet 100% of need. So there are about 60 or 70 schools in the United States that meet 100% of need, and they tend to be selective. Many of them are on the East Coast. This is my favorite site where you can find all of them. 100% meet need colleges, okay? And it's got a list of them. Amherst, Barnard, Bates, Berea, Boston College, Brown University, Caltech, Carleton. You're noticing these are schools that let in probably less than 40% of their applicants. Probably the least selective of this group lets in maybe 33, 34% of their applicants. However, they like kids from Idaho, and some of them now really like rural kids. They're really starting to pay attention, even if you're on the Washington side, they're starting to pay attention to the fact that we represent an area that is somewhat underrepresented on their campuses. And so that really can weigh in your favor. So there's a student from Moscow High at Vassar College, and Vassar is a $70,000 a year college, and I think she's paying $6,000 a year to go there, and she's loving it. And then Louisa said that Yale was really generous, and there's a student from Pullman at Yale, and he's paying very little. There's a college called Franklin and Marshall in Pennsylvania, which is one of the easiest ones to get into, and they really want kids from here. They accept kids that I ask, to apply all the time, but nobody ends up going there. But, so there are options. You definitely want to be a strong student. Interestingly, some of these schools are test optional too, so you don't even have to be a great test taker. I would say there's probably 10 or so of these schools are test optional. So even if you don't get a 700 on your SAT, you could get into one of these schools. The downside is very few of them are in the area. So that's sort of the concern. But if your income is modest and your EFC is low, this should be a list that you seriously consider, okay? Whitman, no, Whitman might not quite be offer this much aid, but they offer a lot. The schools in the West that are on this list, I'm going to look for Whitman. I don't think they're on here. Reed is on here. That might be the only one around here. Northwestern, so that's Chicago.
Boise, it's not.
No, that's Northwest Nazarene. Stanford, oh yeah. Yeah, the mark of these schools, there's a couple of state schools. University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and University of Virginia are two state schools that are on this list. Let's see, I was going to see if USC, Vassar, Washington and Lee, Wellesley. There's a girl from Moscow High at Wellesley who got a really good deal. Yeah, so Whitman's not on here, but Whitman gives pretty good aid as well. So the schools in the West are Reed, Occidental, Stanford, the Pomona, the Claremont schools. Another one that's really good is St. Olaf. I mean, that's a school that a lot of kids from Moscow go to in Minnesota. Yeah, anyway, this is a great list. I really encourage you to look at the list, because it can really help you, okay? There's one other thing you can do if your income is modest and you want to get just an idea of this. There's a website that's called My Intuition, and it's designed to simplify this process for moderate income families, to really show them by just asking a few questions whether they're likely to qualify for a lot of aid. So if you go to myintuition.org, I believe it's like 6 questions you have to answer. And you answer it based on, you pick a school, okay? So these are the participating schools. You will notice many of the same schools that were on that other list. And you would pick one of these schools, but I think your experience would be similar for all of them. Grinnell is in Iowa. That's a really good school. And it's probably one of the easier ones to get in. St. Olaf's, anyway, big range of schools. Pick one of those schools, put in answer your 6 questions and see what you get. Because that would give you a good ballpark idea of how you're likely to fit with this need thing, okay? So that's myintuition.org, okay? So that's the rundown on 100% need. And so the rule of thumb about 100% need is they tend to be more selective. They're wealthier schools. They have endowments. That's why they can do this. They have endowments. And that's why so many of them are far away, because they're on the East Coast, because they've been around for 300 years. So they've been growing endowments for a long time. So that's sort of a mark of it. You can see some of these schools, they don't meet as much need. And so, like I say, if you have modest income, try to get a school that meets as much need as possible, okay? And there will be a point where that school will cost you less than a state school. Not for everybody, but for some people, and you'd get a great education. So, okay, so that's that. Now, how about merit aid? Merit aid is awarded for all kinds of different reasons. Merit just means they want you, okay? It doesn't speak to a fixed category of anything. It may be your grades. It may be your test scores. It may be because you're an athlete. It may be because you're an underrepresented minority. It may be because you're majoring in something that they don't have a lot of people majoring in. And right now, liberal arts are kind of at a premium because a lot of schools have really developed psychology, philosophy, English departments, and a lot fewer kids are pursuing that. So that, if that were an interest of yours, that might make you someone they want to recruit because they want to keep their departments going. First generation might make a difference. Being a guy at a liberal arts school or a woman in an engineering school. Those are things that make you attractive to the school. And then geographic diversity is really important for a lot of schools, and they might give you merit aid because you're from a part of the country they don't get people from, okay? So that's what merit aid means. Many schools are giving a lot more merit aid than they used to. So this chart, the blue is merit aid. And you can see that public schools are giving a lot more merit aid. I mean, you might do better at U of I with merit aid than you do with need-based aid. But even at private schools, they used to give, this used to be need, and now merit is more than need. So it's a really big source of funds, okay? And if you get need-based aid, you can get merit aid too. It's not like one or the other. So why do they give it? They give it to improve their rankings, especially good test scores are a really good ticket to merit aid because good test scores are a number that they can fix, that they can report, and they can say, our kids have test scores in this range, and so that makes them look like better schools, okay? So they like that. I'll show you how that looks on College Board. So if we go to, let's go to, what's a school? Let's go to Grinnell, which is in Iowa. And so this is also Grinnell College. This is also data that's reported. So you go to this thing that says applying, and you go to SAT scores, okay? And it tells you the middle 50% of SAT scores of applicants. And this is a very good school. And so they have very high test scores. Their middle 50 is 640 to 740. And so that's not really a good example because that's so high. But if you want to get merit aid based on your test scores, you want to actually have, so this is the middle 50%. 25% are lower, 25% are higher than that. So what you would like to do to get merit aid at a school is have scores higher than the middle 50. So that's not a good example because those scores are so high. But let's say someplace like Willamette. And bear in mind, some of these schools are test optional as well. So you can still go if you don't have test scores. But if you want to try to get good merit aid based on your test scores, you would. So Willamette's middle 50 is a really wide range. That's a huge range for the middle 50. It's 770 to 1340 total. But you would want to be above 1340 if you want to qualify for merit aid based on your test scores. And you can sort of get an idea of the likely aid you'd get at a school by saying, this is a school that gives merit aid, and I'm up here. So, okay? All right, so let's see. So they give the money because they want good test scores, or they give the money because it makes them look better. It improves their ranking. And also, you all are really in a good position right now because enrollment is falling. I mean, there's fewer kids. And so they are fighting, colleges are fighting to fill their seats. And that is something that really can work in favor of you as a student. Now, Harvard's not fighting to fill its seats. A lot of the schools that give need-based aid, 100% need schools, they're not fighting to fill their seats because people, need that subsidy that they give. But a lot of schools are really struggling to meet their enrollment, and so they will give more aid to get you in there. Okay, so that's why that's worth it. I think this is deceptive, but basically what it's trying to tell you is the parts of the country where you're going to find the most merit aid is like the middle of the country, not the East Coast, not the West Coast, but the middle of the country are places where you're more likely to get good merit aid. In this area, the schools that give like the best merit aid that I know are Carroll College and Linfield College are the two schools that provide very generous merit aid. Okay, Carroll's in Helena, Montana. Linfield is in McMinnville, Oregon. And they're both liberal arts colleges, and they give pretty generous aid. Okay, so how do you figure out how much aid you're going to get from a school? Every school has something called a net price calculator on their website. This is another federal requirement. So you can go to any college and you can type in net price calculator, and it will give you, here, we'll go to the website, not Big Future now, the real live website. University of Portland. You go here and then you search for net price calculator. And this will, here it is, it's going to give you, you begin the process, you put in your information. Hopefully they'll ask you things like grades and test scores so that they're really trying to get a good idea of the merit aid they would give you. But every school is going to have this, okay? I have one right here you can take a look at. I thought I had more of these, but I only have one copy. This is Linfield College. This is what it looked like. I printed it out. I did the net price calculator. You can see the numbers I typed in. And this just they give you sort of this thing, we'll give you this much aid if you come here. And it's not a contract, right? You can't say, wait a minute, you didn't give me exactly the right amount, but it's a good way to get an idea if this is going to be a school that works for you aid-wise, okay? The thing about merit aid is weird. There's no collection of schools like that 100% need school that says these are the best merit aid schools, because I guess it's proprietary and maybe the schools don't want to share it. So you just have to look for third parties that sort of collect the information. And I have a list, and I'm happy to share it with you. It's a big spreadsheet, so I'm not going to send it to you, but if you want it, ask me for it, and I will. But it's big, so I probably won't do that. There's also things like a lot of schools give money to national merit finalists, or there are free ride schools for national merit scholarships. That's something to know about. And they don't show up on the EFC. There's other scholarships that maybe aren't going to show up. But it's a really good idea of where the money comes from. So let me show you this other thing that gives you a good idea of how to get merit money. It's called raise.me, okay? And it's, I think you can overdo it. I don't think it's kind of a gimmick, okay? But what it is, they call it micro scholarships. And they have about 250 participating schools. And these schools have this thing where they say, okay, you plug in how many A's you get. You plug in every A you get in a class. You plug in your participation in sports. You plug in your participation in a club and whether you're the president of a club. And we'll give you little scholarships. We'll tell you how much we'll give you if you come here. So you sort of rack up, you can rack up money from all these different schools. And it's a real range of schools. I would say that's a pretty good stand-in for merit aid. You don't have to do this to get merit aid. And these little numbers that they're giving you, that's not in addition to the merit aid they'd otherwise give you. It's sort of like just giving you a picture of it. But these schools, it's a good way to see, I think this is a good way to see what kind of merit aid you can get. And here's some these are their little things. Somebody got $5,000 from Florida University. Somebody got $54,000 from Susquehanna University. So you can do that. And the other thing that's good about that is it gives you an example of how what you do in school makes a difference to your, the money you get. It does, everything you do makes a difference in how affordable college is going to be. So your achievements will directly correlate to the amount of money that a school is going to give you. So and this is a valuable lesson to learn. So that's a good reason to do this site. So that's raise.me, okay? I have one other thing I was going to show you. Oh, no, one other thing I was going to say. So some schools, the really hard to get into schools, they give all their money in need-based aid. Because they don't have to do anything to attract kids, right? So like Harvard doesn't give merit aid. Stanford doesn't give merit aid. But what they do is they have a really broad definition of need. And so like Stanford says, if you make $100,000, you don't pay tuition at Stanford. Harvard says if your family income is less than $150,000, you only pay 10% for college. So there's these little special deals at those top colleges, but that's kind of a little special boutique-y thing, okay? So that's all I've got.